Hello, this is Af Malhotra on Straight Talk with Af. I have the most phenomenal guest with me today, and someone who I have to say has written not many, but more than many books, in fact, and has a diverse and I would say compelling view on the role of technology and, more importantly, AI, which is what we're going to discuss today, and its impacts on humanity. I have the wonderful Faisal Hoque on the show today. Faisal, welcome to Straight Talk with Af.
Thanks for having me. I've been
It's a
looking
real
forward.
pleasure. It's a real pleasure. I just want to say a couple of things about you, and so the audience understands your background very briefly, of course, and then we're going to go right into your latest book, Transcend, which, by the way, I'm privileged to speak to you because the book is it's a pre-release conversation, right?
Yes,
Because the book is out on the 8th of April. Correct me if I'm wrong. Is that right?
that's correct. Yeah.
Amazing. So thank you for giving me this time. I like it when I'm speaking to someone before they release their books. And by the way, you are a best-selling author, Wall Street Journal best-selling author, and you've had three big books like Reinvent, Everything Connects, and Lift prior to Transcend. So I'm sure this is also going to be another bestseller, and I'm privileged to speak to you today. So very quickly, so Faisal, is recognized as one of the world's leading management thinkers and technologists. He's definitely an entrepreneur. So a fellow entrepreneur here as well. So I like that. A business innovator and an author, of course, with over 3 decades of experience across multiple industries. He's the founder of Shadoka and Next Chapter and various other companies. And like I said, he's been given the accolade of having won the Wall Street Journal best-selling author for multiple books. So, you're well established in this game. You get it. And I think everything you think of and what you put into words and then publish is essential. It's essential reading. So that's for all of my guests and fans and listeners out there on Straight Talk. You've got to buy Faisal's book. Now, let's go into this. So Faisal, before I speak about an author's book, I always ask them about who they are and a little bit about their personal story, because eventually I'd like to know what compelled you to write this book and why now. But before we do so, tell us a little bit about you. Like, how did you end up being an author? What's the story? I guess you're in the United States. Were you always from the United States? A little bit about your background, because I think that's really important for the audience to understand, so they understand who you are before they go into the output.
Sure. Look, I originally come from Bangladesh. I moved to US when I was 19 years old. Came here to go to school. Started school in Southern Illinois University, then switched to University of Minnesota Duluth campus on a full scholarship. My first job was as a janitorial engineer, which is graveyard shift janitorial work. I built my first commercial software when I was a senior year. That led me to get a job with a Fortune 500 company called Pitney Bowes here in Connecticut. And since then, I went to work for Dun& Bradstreet, started my first company, launched GE's first e-commerce business during the time when internet was just coming out and browsers was coming out. Writing, and then since then I had several companies, a couple of them very successful, a couple of them miserable failures. This is part of the entrepreneurial journey. I got fired from my own company which was backed up by classic VC funding. So I've kind of gone through the whole cycle, and then most recently I've been working a lot with our government in the DoD and DHS space, all with technology and business transformation related. The writing started about 20 years ago almost now. My first book was published by Cambridge University Press, where I argued that technology means nothing if you don't know how to use it for proper business value creation and for business model. Since then, Transcend is actually my 10th book. Um,
Wow. Okay, it's your 10th book, so my apologies.
yeah.
Right. Okay.
No worries. The last three that you mentioned is recent releases, and there's a story behind this new emergence of writing, which I'll come to that in a second. When I started writing, I was writing more from very business centric point of view, not so much about humanity, but more about how do you scale businesses with technology and where technology plays a role, and what are the financial driver that you can create from the maturity of organization when you are implementing technology. Then, so 10 plus years ago, you mentioned everything connects. I kind of started feeling this need to kind of go back to my roots in terms of my Eastern philosophical background, and I was very much exposed to Japanese culture because I had a board member who was very keen on philosophical tenet of humanity. So I spent quite a bit of time in Japan, and that kind of led me to write this book called Everything Connects, which is kind of this foundationally who we are, explore foundationally who we are, and how does that allows us to create the value that we each bring to the world. And that was almost 10, 12 years ago. Since then, my writing and my exploration of humanity and technology has dramatically changed. And since you got a little sense of transcend, it's part philosophy, part business, part technology, and part humanity. And I've kind of gone through several iteration of personal transformation. By the way, the books are all for charity, 100% for charity, because especially for cancer research, because I have a now 22-year-old son who's a cancer survivor. So all the book proceed goes to cancer research. So I'm going to stop there. So you can ask me a question. Otherwise, I'll be babbling for next one.
No, that's beautiful. That's beautiful. And, I always find it very inspiring and amazing to hear people's journeys in terms of the ups and downs and the highs and the lows, or the traumas and the accolades and the breakthroughs that people have. And often there is always story of some pain. And, whether
Yeah,
it's being an entrepreneur and going through the journey that you described, and or of course pain closer to home, where someone that you love, has been through a difficult time. And so firstly, I'm very happy to hear that your child has got through it, and I'm sure that was just incredible to see him or her, sorry, fight through it.
yeah,
And yeah, fight through it, because of course it takes a special level of um, grit to get up and be yourself again once you've been through health trauma. I speak from experience, having carried 2 decades of health trauma in different hospital beds around the world. So I get it. So I connect with you. And therefore, I think a lot of your book and the way you touch on the, not just the philosophical side, I think where you touch on the human side is quite compelling. And so thank you for that. I really appreciate it. And I just want to speak about this book briefly. So I guess in this book, you're exploring this sort of intricate relationship between AI and humanity, right? And you're trying to examine both the potential and the dangers of AI that we all know about, of course, because we're working in AI as well. And I think you're essentially saying that AI can unlock huge, unprecedented human capabilities, and it can have a catastrophic impact, but also breakthrough impact that we should be aware of and think about this very wisely and in a grown-up way, as they say. And you are encouraging people who read the book to go a few levels deeper, right? Rather than the superficial stuff that, with respect, that you see on the news channels and media channels, the 400 words, article on AI is going to destroy the world. It's almost incumbent upon us to go a few steps deeper and start reading more than the news article and a few more pages to think deeply and about the ethical and philosophical implications of AI, right? And so I love the fact that you're trying to balance both, and you're still looking at safeguarding, which of course is an extremely important and hot topic, especially on this side of the world, with the EU AI Act being the only, I think, some form of structured regulation, albeit whether it's enforced or not, and whether it's going to work, time will tell. I want to first start with these two frameworks that I love, uh, and I think you've used the right words for it. And the two frameworks are, and let's start with the book with this. So, the book, you're talking about many concepts and ideas and so on, but I want to start with this open and care frameworks, the two frameworks that you've sort of referred to. And I think the way I interpreted open, I've got it here, I just made some notes, is, open is about really understanding and maximizing the value and benefits of AI and understanding how it can be done. And so you appreciate it, internalize it, and then you do it better. And then care, of course, is about, I would say, even preempting, mitigating, or even managing the risks related to AI. So let's start there, if it's okay. Can you tell us
Sure,
what that's all
sure.
about? What are these frameworks
Yeah,
about, and why did you
look,
create them?
look. I mean, it's it goes very fundamentally what we started talking about. I mean, to maximize the potential of any technology, and more specifically AI, obviously you have to have this very open mindedness to create and explore what's possible, what's the art of possibilities. So the open, obviously, it's an acronym. It has various steps and and sub methodology behind the framework, which resulted from 30 years of doing all kind of work around the globe. While you're doing that, you also have to care that you're not creating something destructive, and that's where the care comes in. And care is really a risk mitigation or risk management framework. So, and we did this by the point of view of we have to be super optimistic, because that's how we solve problem, and that's how we have that open-mindedness. And you almost have to have a beginner's mind to explore what's really possible. Care comes from really mitigating the risk, but by thinking about what are the catastrophic things that can happen. That's what C stands for. The catastrophic possibilities that can happen with AI. And we all know by now, that there's enormous opportunity, but there's also major risk that can happen. So the open framework allows you to look into what are the purpose and the vision that you have, and what possibilities and what kind of portfolio of possibilities that you can create to whatever area that you're exploring, whether that's cancer research, whether that's for coming up with a productivity tool, or whether that's coming up with a set of application that helps you with national security, whatever the case may be. And the care kind of walks you through, okay, let's create a risk portfolio and then overlay this opportunity portfolio and risk portfolio together and see where the biggest bang for the buck, not just from a financial reward, but also from human impact point of view. So it's like a paradoxical outlook that while you're trying to innovate, you also have to slow down, and while you're looking for potential, you also have to look at the risk.
Yeah, it's a great point, and I think as you think about the open and the care frameworks, you also speak about this symbiosis between human and AI, which I find quite intriguing, because the jury's divided, right? I mean, not necessarily two sides, but you are seeing people who are very pro AI and understand its huge game changing impact and implications in the near future and beyond. And then you have those who are really very scared
Yeah.
and paranoid about what's going on. I like the fact that you use the words detach and devote. Tell us a little bit about what you mean by detach and devote in the
Sure.
context of human AI harmony?
Sure. Look, I mean, the detach and devote comes from very Eastern philosophical, more specifically Buddhist philosophical point of view that you have to be devoted to humanity and you have to detach yourself from the things that could cause harm. So that's where detach and devotion comes from. So the point of devotion is that you have to be devoted to the purpose and the impact that you're creating. Hopefully, that impact and purpose for the greater goods of humanity, and you have to be detached from things that causes harm, right? So that's where it comes from. So you have to almost decide what how much is too much. And so, for example, I mean, we look at when we talk about AI in the book, we talk about that you also almost have to look at as your partner. And if you look at where it stands today, it's already far more smarter than two people or four people because it got a vast, especially if you look at the large language models. I mean, it has a vast collection of information that neither one of us can match. But we could be a partnering up with it to help us to be more productive, right? So this is where that balanced approach comes from. So, for example, I mean, you could use a, let's say, presentation AI software to turn your document into a presentation. In that case, you're gaining productivity, right? But let's imagine if we start outsourcing every thought and everything we do to AI, then you're really crossing the boundary because you are actually um, becoming a subsidized resource to an AI versus you're leveraging AI to do that allows you to do things that you should be doing yourself, right? So
Right,
there's a
right.
balance, right? And then as you start thinking about what's in the pipeline, meaning the AGI, which is the artificial general intelligence, and you're looking at the agentic AI. I mean, we're just at the very beginning stage of what's possible, right? And that possibility could be a factor that we could be totally outsourced. Meaning, now all of a sudden you have this super intelligence which humanity has never seen before because we're at the apex in terms of species and intelligence. Now you have a species, let it be a synthetic species, but it is much more smarter than you are, right? Or you as an individual are, or maybe 10 people are, or 20 people are, because when you have a global resource that can compute and that can think and that can extract data and information a lot faster than any of us can, obviously that creates a different level of dichotomy and different level of supremacy that we have never encountered, right? So, and obviously, we talked about a little bit about ethics, and we talked about the boundaries. When things becomes unregulated, it could be quite harmful. I mean, imagine, I actually touched upon this in the book, but also from doing a lot of work in my work in the government sector. I did spend some time with our legislator, meaning U.S. legislator, meaning senators and whatnot. And I mean, if you look at like nuclear energy as a industry, or if you look at drug industry as an industry, they are far more regulated than information technology has ever been. And we're because we just took it for granted and it's very accessible. We didn't really look at it the the bad impact that this kind of technology can have. But now it's cropping up to us because we've seen this. What has happened with social media? What has happened with manipulation of algorithm and whatnot? And now we're reaching to the next level. So this is why you have to be radically optimistic, but you also have to be very vigilant. In terms of what it can do, and if you don't start paying attention to what could actually happen to humanity as a whole.
Yeah, yeah. You make a salient point, and with that, I want to bring you to one of the most important questions. I think at the outset is, you talk about in your book this concept of AI could be a mirror of humanity, right?
Mhm.
And we've just talked about the different facets of it, the open, the care, the detach, the devote, and so on. But then again, my question really is like, if AI could be a mirror of humanity, then reflecting both our strengths and our flaws, how do you then ensure that the flaws don't overpower the strengths in the development of AI?
Look, it's a very tough question to answer because I don't think we have quite figured that out because we're just feeding all kind of information and you know it, I mean yes, AI is different than let's say traditional data source where you have a database and you have an application and it's the application is feeding off the data. There's a generative nature to the AI where we didn't see in the previous system and application. So what is happening is that I mean, I'll give you a very personal example, right? Let's say, and it's not a bad example. It's a matter of fact. So, for example, when my son got diagnosed, he was 18, and we couldn't really find data set for patient who is in his age group for the kind of disease he was diagnosed with, right? So because we have data sources that are fed consciously or unconsciously with biases, right? So, for example, you can say, okay, you want to look at a hiring database and you want AI to give you the best candidates, but let's say somebody fed that database with best people are in New York, so you're going to get all the candidates who lives in New York. So these are not intentional. This could be unintentional, but this intentional data structure and data feeding and data construct is what's going to make AI good or bad. And then you can take this information, you can look at this thing from a very dark point of view. I'm just giving you some very simple example that are unintentionally will create a lot of data feeding and decision that are not necessarily good for the consumer of the data.
Yeah, it's interesting. I'll narrate a very quick story, and in full transparency and vulnerability, my first startup, going back to your point, real life situation, this is 10 years ago, AI wasn't really as rife and popular then. We hired a team out in Bangalore and we were building a data platform. And without giving too much detail, we had a team, and then I saw the data rendered on the front end, and I thought this is odd because it was a startup data platform, so a company could ask for a business problem to be solved, and the matching algorithm would find the sort of startup to do it. And what was bizarre was most of the startups that I saw, especially when this is a global platform, but we had an India wing as well. They were of the same kind in the sense that all the founders went to the same IIT university, etc., etc. And where I'm going with the men and so on. And I was like scratching my head, and I said to my partner, then I said something's not right, and he was like, "Well, what's the problem?" I said, "But this doesn't. It can't be. There's an issue here." And of course, surprise, surprise, all the people who are coders were from those similar backgrounds. And yes, it was unintentional. It wasn't some
Right,
devious, cunning
right,
plan to skew
right,
us. So I think that's what I would call sort of bad AI. And the way we fix that is by building diverse teams in the creation and coding of AI.
right. No, absolutely. And you have to be very intentional.
Yes.
If I can use that word, you have to be very intentional and very purpose driven
Yeah.
in
Yeah.
terms of what you're trying to do. That's not about regulation. That's actually borderlines with ethics, right? So, especially when you are trying to create, application that impacts decision related to another human being. And so whether that's in healthcare, whether that's in hiring process, whether that's in education, whatever the case may be, you have to be very intentional and very purpose driven.
Yeah, I want to take you into because you used the term LLMs a second ago, which is large language models. And for those who
Yeah,
don't know what an LLM is, essentially when you go on GPT or you go on Perplexity, which is using many LLMs, or you go onto Claude, which is another chat
yeah,
platform. It uses LLM called Anthropic. These large language models have swallowed up the internet essentially, and
yeah,
so when you chat to them, they give you information that has been collected by ingesting or digesting all of the internet's data. Now, let's talk about LLMs for a second, because of course, at a consumer level, I generally, when I look at AI, I tend to spend time when I deliver my keynotes to firstly distinguish AI versus Gen AI, because I think AI
Sure.
has been around for a long time, and I think people
Yes.
do. They're the same thing, don't get me wrong, but they're also different. And you just use the word generative, which basically means it generates new stuff and it's got ideas and it makes stuff up that the old AI probably is not as good at doing. My question is, as these AI models and LLM models evolve, how should we address the ethical dilemma of bias? Because that's what we're talking about in AI systems, especially when those biases reflect societal inequalities. I'll give you a scenario. I'm using GPT, I'm using whatever as a consumer, not even as a business. We'll come to that in a second. Now, I'm just typing stuff in and getting responses, and I'm really excited about the fact that, I'm getting this incredible insight from the platform. I really don't know how it's being adjudicated or measured and how bias is being controlled. Tell us a little bit about where you see this going and what measures you think we need to put in place.
Sure. So there's multiple. There are multiple things that will shape this. So first, there's obviously an individual responsibility, and this is what I was this is what I was getting to, that you have to uh, prevent yourself by completely outsourcing your critical thinking process, so you can validate what sounds right, what sounds wrong. And the
Yeah, yeah,
best users of large language model, by the way, are the domain expert that are expert in a particular field, because they can look at this stuff and decide whether it's correct or wrong. Right. So that's one step. Second step, that there's a responsibility by the organization or the businesses or the platform who are actually creating these large language models and feeding the data, right? Because if they are going, just like your example of your developers, they have responsibility of feeding the data that are intentionally are not biased, right? And
right,
and
right.
make sure that hallucination is not happening. And in what happens with a lot of technology innovation, we go at it at a very fast pace, and we kind of forget a lot of these fundamentals of what's right, what's wrong, and we just want to try to push this out as fast as we can, and it doesn't always come out right, and in many cases it's harmful. And it's just not with the information technology, but you can also see in the drug industry, they've made a lot of mistake trying to go at it too fast. But the third element is actually the government regulation, because the government has to step in to make sure that there's a legal ramification when you are purposefully and intentionally not looking at these things. And obviously, there's all kind of technical guardrail that you can put in place so that you can validate the data. And you can see that many of these large language models are now introducing deep research that does much bigger, thorough research, and pulls out the data sources, or looks at the citations and find out whether somebody really said it or not, et cetera, et cetera. I would also, because last week I was actually talking to a bunch of people, and kind of talking about the fact that in the 90s, I was very much involved. Late 90s, I was very much involved with what they used to call component-based software, which is it's the idea is that you have these self-sustaining, smaller smart application or software that does specific tasks. I think we're going to start seeing emergence of what people are calling, the small language model, which is nothing new. Even people like Jeffrey Hinton, the quote unquote the godfather of AI, has written and explored these small language models, where it's very concise and very focused on specific tasks. And you're going to see the agents are also adopting these small language models that are focused on specific data set and specific data, which could be a better accuracy, but also more efficient, because small language models can be run on a local area versus this large language model, which hogs up a huge amount of the server farms and whatnot. Small language models can be run on smaller GPUs and a smaller processing. So as the processing power goes
Right.
higher, from the accuracy and from a specific task and research point of view, I think we'll see more emergence of small language models.
Yeah, it's a great point, and I think I think many new startups who are domain specific or hyper personalized apps that are taking a vertical approach to solving a business problem are going to be looking at more cost effective ways of launching
Yes.
these platforms, right? So, I mean, the message to people listening to this podcast really is that if you are a startup founder or wish to be one, or are scaling your business and you're looking at an optimized way of building a highly specialized data world, then you can use a small language model. And I think it's a fair point. You talk about this concept of the beginner's mind when partnering with AI. Could you expand on what you mean by this from a mindset standpoint, and
Yeah,
what are you saying to what can we learn from that?
sure. Look, the beginner's mind is a Buddhist concept where you force yourself to empty your preconcept preconceptual notion and learning so that you can consume new things. Is the whole notion of half empty versus half full, right? So and the knowledge take the shape of the cup is kind of that notion. So in terms of exploration of new technology, especially if you when you're talking about things like AI, you have to have that beginner's mind that you don't really know anything because it doesn't act like anything else we have seen in the past.
Yeah,
Because I mean, it's not like it's much more active, if I can use that word, versus passive. Like in the sense that think about your desktop application as an example, right? So I mean, you go in there and you put your calendar and it's okay, I have a meeting on Thursday. Versus you have a AI partner now that could say, okay, could you look at my calendar and see what's the best time to have a podcast with you, me as a user, and it will look for it and it will suggest various times. So it's a much more active participant, right? So you have to kind of rethink how you look at this, and it's really emerging as a synthetic being, a new species that you're interacting with. And it can get very deep, as you know. It's not just from doing tasks, but the conversation you're having, the research you're doing, the relationship that you may be forming, et cetera, et cetera, right? So it's a new way of, and you talked about the open and care framework. The second step of open, P stands for partnership. It's partnering not just with another human being, it's partnering with a AI persona that will decide how your relationship is going to be forming. So, which is a very a foreign concept for most of us because we form relationship with another human being. We have formed relationship with other species. Like you can think about it like a relationship with your dog or a relationship with your pet, right? It's very emotional and very you get something out of it. I think that's about to happen with AI as well, especially as the cognition level of AI gets increased with AGI and agentic AI, and you can see even when you call and the chat bot, it's really an AI
right.
agent
Yeah,
reacting like it would be.
yeah. It's the other thing that's really interesting here in the book is you're looking at the dimensions of the good and bad side of AI, and then of course the big question that I think most business owners and consumers are sort of grappling with right now, and I don't think anyone has an answer, and I hope you can give us more perspective on it, which is about regulation, right? So if you look at it at a consumer level, just today I was on listening to a radio channel where there were these distressed parents, some who've lost their children to suicide because of social media apps like TikTok, and others who have somehow managed to preserve and keep their children alive, although the children aren't in a great state. And they narrated examples of how these apps have captured images and videos of children trying to commit suicide, and of course with the TikTok brand, embedded in it, pretty much, and how these algorithms are pretty much coming up
Manipulative.
and targeting young people. And this was a 13-year-old child. I mean, this is a very distressing side of AI. Let's be honest. And so,
100%.
what is your take on this now? And let's talk a bit about regulation, because I think all of us feel like regulators are behind the curve pretty much always. And I do feel confident about the EU AI Act. I think I have to respect the folks in the European Union who've had the courage to put something together, albeit that it's not necessarily going to be as dynamic because it's quite chunky. Here in the United Kingdom, we're taking a more sort of, I think we call it a light, a more agile approach to regulation, and we made it industry led. What is your view? I mean, let me give you a scenario. You're in a position of power now, right? And you can control this stuff. You're the super regulator, and you're massively ethical and responsible with the Buddhist mindset. What should we do now? How do we control this thing?
Look, a lot of people, even if you listen to Jeffrey Hinton, they said it's already beyond control, right? But I would like to, I like to think that no, it's nothing is too late, right? There's always a hope. Look, I mean, you talked about the fact that, um, you know, generative AI, things like ChatGPT kind of put a full lens on what AI is. But as you said, that AI has been around for a while. And if you look at social media, the algorithm manipulation, it's not just social media. Like, if you go to Amazon and you say, okay, you log on and it automatically suggests that it's time to buy a new pair of sneakers, and Netflix tells you this is the next show you should be seeing. Those are all a form of algorithmic manipulation, which is a part of AI, right? I mean, I think the industry failed miserably in terms of social media regulation, because a lot of the things you talked about, the impact on children, our addictive behavior, bullying, loss of ability to form meaningful relationship. It's all came from social media. And then you can take it to the next level. There's actually national security threat, geopolitical threat, because of how people gets manipulated with certain kind of information, et cetera, et cetera. And we didn't pay enough attention, and we just started to pay attention. And you saw all those things about the whole notion of people utilizing social media to take revenge on each other, and impersonation, and the whole notion of identity theft, etc., etc. So you add the current stage of AI to all that. If we are not paying attention, to regulation, then we are really doing disservice to humanity. And there's many level of regulation, right? I am of the opinion that many people feel that if you are regulating, that you are actually harming innovation. I would argue that if you regulate, you can actually drive innovation in a way that could be more impactful to humanity, right? More meaningful to humanity. So I'm not against innovation. I'm an innovator myself. I'm a technologist myself. So I'm all for innovation, but you have to make sure that innovation doesn't fall into the wrong hand and people are not being manipulated. So that's why regulation is very, very important, and it's a multi-level of regulation you have to think about. All for innovation, but you have to focus on personal, freedom and personal privacy, and being able to protect your digital and other type of IP that exist.
Hmm.
Regulation around how we're doing trading with each other, meaning the trade rules, not meaning company to company, but from nation to nation. There's element of that. So many of the in US, you talk about the EU. In US, both side on the aisle, both on the Republican side and on the Democratic side, there are a number of legislative framework that has been pushed for the last 3 to 5 years, but it really didn't get any kind of traction. So I don't know where it will end up, but if we don't have those kind of guardrail and legislative framework, because you have to hold people accountable when they do stuff that are harmful. There is no way. If you don't have any law, then you're not holding people accountable. So the legislation comes from regulation, but it is to hold people accountable and organization accountable. And if you don't have any guardrail, it's going to create those kind of disastrous situation, and it's going to cause more harm than actual impact for elevating humanity to the next level.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, and I think it's a hard question, right? It's a really hard
Yeah.
question because, of course, it's a moving target. One perspective I want to just add here around regulation is what I refer to as upstream AI. And upstream AI is really looking at the power players, right? The dominators. I would call them the custodians, curators, and creators of AI. And there is a small cluster of people on the planet right now doing that. You're of course, very well aware of that. And there lies the first discussion, which is, of course, there are a small minority of people creating these models. Let's take just generative AI as an example. And of course, they are distributing these models, and then smaller players like me and you and various others are building our technology solutions specific
Yeah.
to problems that we think need to be solved with this base technology, right? And the question really is, to what extent are these custodians of AI going to be held accountable, given
I
that
mean,
they are, yeah,
yeah, I mean, look, it's the platform vendors. I mean, let's define them as the platform vendor. They're the creator of the platform vendors, right? So, and in that platform vendor, there are people who are creating, like the actual hardware. So you could say, okay, well, look, do we put regulation around hardware? And then there's the software vendor who are really creating these models and hosting these models, and they're creating these. Large data centers, lack of better words, where you're hosting all these data along with the model. So those are really the players, as you said, the custodian of where these models are going. And as I was saying, that in social media, there was like 5, 6, 7, 10 social media platform, which we didn't do a very good job of regulating. I mean, you were mentioning TikTok, there's Facebook, and there's Twitter, and there's this handful of social media platform that we didn't do a very good job of regulating, and we're we are we are facing the challenge of not regulating as well as we should be regulating those social media platform. And some social media platforms stayed true to their mission or purpose, and some didn't, right? So, and I'm not endorsing or criticizing. It's just a matter of fact. So if you look at the purpose of LinkedIn, this is where most of our professional global population lives and breathes and share ideas. It kind of stayed true to this is a professional network. Some people goes there and do so. So it's a community driven governance, individual governance, and the mission of the platform kind of kept that as where it is now, right? And we all benefit from that. You look at X, or you look at Facebook, and you look at TikTok, it's free for all, and it doesn't have a purpose. It does, but it really doesn't. It doesn't stay true to its mission or purpose or intention, and it went dry, and we didn't have a regulation. So my point is that it's a platform vendor's ethical North Star, plus the regulation, plus our individual behavioral pattern, that's going to dictate where human society goes. And that's why I end the book by saying the future of AI is whatever we collectively decide. And who is we? We are all part of the ecosystem, right? I mean, one person, two-person is not going to dictate, but collectively, and this is where democracy comes in, whatever form it is, right? Democratically, whatever we decide, what is normal and what is moral, that's what we're going to feed this engine, and that's what it's going to become. And time will tell whether that is good or bad or whatever. And you can talk about prime directive, right? I mean, today If we were crafting the AI by saying the prime directive of AI is to protect humanity, then it's going to start thinking, okay, what is humanity, right? I mean, that's where we start the book, and which part of the humanity that needs to be protected, and who's to decide what that is and what is that not, right? So these are very philosophical questions, and I don't think we know that answer. It remains to be seen. When I take a very kind of like a pessimistic view, I get very sad. When I take a very optimistic view, I get excited because I mean, like, for example, I think there's a lot AI will do for healthcare. I mean, things that we can solve today. Like I was, recently lost my mother last year. And I was, she suffered from dementia, and she was at a nursing home at tail end of her life. She couldn't she would switch back to her native tongue, which is Bengali, and she wouldn't translate to English, and she couldn't communicate with her aid giver. And I was thinking that if there was an AI agent who was instantly translating what she was talking about, it would be much easier for our caregiver and her to interact. So there's monumental opportunity in cases like that. There's also mental disastrous scenario where you will have AI in a rogue agent's hand, and they will drive around drones and they will cause a lot of harm. So it remains
Mm.
to be.
I'm a big optimist on AI, of course. So I might be biased because I only see good in in AI's impacts. But again, I'll go use the word you used earlier, which is intentionality. And I think no founder wakes up in the morning with a bright idea to say, "Oh, I'm going to create really bad AI to destroy the world." I would say, the majority of us wake up in the morning thinking that we're doing good AI, and it's for a problem we want to solve or something we want to make better, or a revelation or some sort of a breakthrough. It can go wrong though, where your intentions might have been good, but without enough of a watchdog, regulation, governance, and independent people watching over your business, you could go down the wrong path, right? Like with anything in
Yeah,
life.
absolutely. And look, I mean, why do we have law? It's not because we think everybody is bad. It's because when somebody does something bad, we want to hold them accountable, right? So if you don't have any law, then it's easy to drift. I'm using an AI term here, but AI does drift, right? So does humanity. I think you need law and regulation to hold people accountable and keep things in check, right? So that's one point. The other point is it's not the question of creators. Meaning, let's say I create an application. I can create a presentation that pictures a rosy picture, or I can create a presentation that shows all the bad things that's happening today on the planet and get very depressed. So it's not the fault of the AI engine that's creating the presentation. It's the user who is, portraying or distributing a particular message that creates a good or a bad idea. So it's not on user's hand. So that's what I was saying, that whatever will happen, it depends on whatever we do. And if 100 people start using it for with bad intention, and only 2 people are trying to use it for good intention, I think the 100 people will win, right? Because it's a democracy. At the end of the day, democracy, in the not in the political sense, is that majority kind of dictates where it goes, right? So, fashion trends, music trends, moral trends, it's all driven by the larger amount of people dictating a particular point of view.
Yeah, no, you're bang on, and I think that sort of brings us to a few important questions. The first one really is the one that comes from most people, both in businesses and at a consumer level, which is the assumption that, let's say we start using generative AI. Let's just focus on Gen AI, just because it's a very consumer centric,
Yeah.
approachable way of dealing with AI. And I become so dependent on it and addicted to it that, God, will I end up losing my abilities to just think on a blank sheet of paper? And will I get into the habit of going back to my AI, let's call it some sort of an avatar that gets created for me, my digital twin on one of these platforms. And I'm now at a point, it's been a year and a half, and I've forgotten how to frame an email because everything I write now goes through this pipeline. Tell us a little bit about your views on the pros and cons of
Yeah.
the addictive nature of AI. How do you ensure that you don't lose your human skills? Is the point that I'm making.
Look, I mean, it's a you have to look at if I can use this analogy. Human beings are addicted to convenience, right? I mean, we like convenience. We like we like to be entertained. We like to live in an environment that's comfortable, right? So hence lies the problem. So if you're not disciplined, you will end up outsourcing your critical thinking to AI. But there's an opportunity, the way you can reverse that thinking, that if you, now that you have a partner, if I can use that as a word, you can be 1,000 times more productive than you were before. So, for example, don't say, write me an article on mindfulness as an example. You can say, I think about mindfulness this way, and I want to use this way. Pull some research that supports that theory, or argue with me where I'm wrong, right? So in that scenario, you're actually enhancing your critical thinking process, right?
Yeah,
So
yeah.
if you're going to be lazy and say, okay, write me an article or write me an email, you are outsourcing your critical thinking capabilities. But if you're using it as a partner and almost as a sparring partner, intellectual sparring partner, you'll increase your intellectual capabilities.
So it's a little bit almost like the first day I start using it to the 365th day I'm using it, there's a maturity curve of sorts. The first day
Yes.
could be write me a letter or tell me a joke, or make up a poem for me. And then, of course, right at the end, 365 days, you're now in seeing it as a companion. So you're chatting with it. You're like, I don't really agree with this point. What's your view on it? Well, I don't, whatever it may be. So I like that. And I think there's probably an opportunity to create some sort of a journey. If you think of this as a journey that an individual user needs to go on with a GPT or my platform, which is called Ren or whatever it may be, where it's not day one, right? You're going to take all my skills away, because that's
No,
how
no,
it
no.
doesn't be, right?
Absolutely. And you're going to have to learn how to use any of these tools, right?
Yeah,
And different tools will be for different things. And as you learn how these, living, breathing system reacts and helps you, you can also improve how you interact with it, right? So it's not as you said, it's a maturity curve of learning, exploring, and then executing, right? So
yeah.
you kind of have to follow that model. The other point is, we started with we started the conversation by saying, you really have to define what humanity is. I can define humanity in two words. One is freedom, other one is love. It's freedom to explore who we are, and love, meaning what do you care about that allows you to define your purpose, right? So it could be that I care about my family and that's my purpose in life, so that I'm going to do anything and everything I can to increase the quality of life for my family. That could be your purpose, right? But I have to have the freedom to do it in my way. Once you're giving up either one of those elements, that's when you start losing your humanity.
Very, very interesting concept, because I think it was Chomsky. I was watching something recently where it was a clear argument that suggested, if I use your definition of humanity, which, by the way, I will probably steal, if that's okay. He spoke about the fact that the corporation is totalitarian, and essentially you have no freedom. And of course, I'm not poo-pooing anyone, or this shouldn't create a trend of people leaving their jobs. But essentially, until the organization of yesterday isn't going to augment and change and become flexible and open and agile and responsive to the current state of humanity. Working from home is a great example. Doing a podcast on the back of a platform like this is another great example of, think about the accessibility. I mean, just think about the phenomenal cross pollination that's going on right now in this moment. And I'm fortunate to have done it 142 times. I would have never been able to do that if I was bound by
Yeah,
my location because I couldn't get to you, right?
right. Of course, and look, this entire leadership model and the management model dramatically have started to change during pandemic because we started to have that constraint of not being able to have the freedom to meet each other, right? But
Right.
that's now changed completely. And we have to think from a we talk about generative AI. We have to think about regeneration of leadership and management that focus on regenerating resources that enables people and resources to the next level. It's not about just sustaining it. It's how can we regenerate, resources that enables others to do what they do.
Yeah.
And so that goes to intentionality and purpose.
Yeah, beautiful. I could speak to you for hours, but I have two final questions before we close off. The first one is a little bit trite, so it's not a new question, but I do like to ask it because selfishly I learn a lot from it. And this question is very much about the Faisal that is sitting in front of me now, and then the younger version of you. Imagine that younger version in an avatar or hologramic form, or even a synthetic form is right there in front of you. You can see your childhood body, face, you can feel it, and that child's looking up at you and saying, damn, like you're my thanks for this 30-second. What should I do to make my life really livable and enjoyable and fulfilling? What would you say to the younger version of Faisal?
Look, a couple of things is that when we are young, we're always in a rush, and we're not always very mindful of what's going around us, right? And it is through that mindful observation that you discover yourself. I wish I discovered myself, who I am, uh, sooner than what I've done in the last 10, 15 years. Because I'm not the same person. Nobody is. And when you're young, so this intentional pause and mindfulness is very critical for self-actualization. And we often forget that. And I wish I did that sooner than where I ended up. But I'm glad where I am. And I wouldn't change my journey because my journey is uniquely defined who I am. So don't try to change your journey. Try to observe and be mindful about your journey.
Nicely said. Thank you. I love that. Now let's look at 20 years out, and you're in this, I guess, different world. What do you think you're going to be doing 20 years from now, in from the point of view of the AI world?
Who knows? But all I know is that I'm going to keep pushing myself to learn something new every day, explore something new every day, and try to be as free as I can be, and love everything that I do and anybody that I encounter wholeheartedly. Right. So that's the best I can do. Whatever will happen will happen.
I like it. You left it to destiny. You left it to the universe, and
Yeah.
you are right. We have limited control. So today's been fantastic. Thank you for giving me your time. I really do appreciate it. Honored to have you on the show. How has the last 60 minutes been for you? It's flown by the way, but please give me some input. How have you um, experienced the last 60 minutes in this conversation?
Okay, this was having a conversation with a very close friend in a coffee shop, right? But talking about really important and deep stuff. So I enjoyed it. Whatever you asked and whatever I talked about was pure from heart. That's the best kind of conversation. It was not to promote anything or to sell anything or to convince anybody or anything, just having a normal conversation. So I very much enjoyed that. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, thank you. I take that on board, and I love these conversations to be as natural as possible. However, I will do the sales plug-in for you because your book is out. Transcend is out on the 8th of April. And I would encourage all of my friends and viewers and fans of Straight Talk to go onto Amazon and type the name and look for Faisal Hoque's name and buy the book and maybe buy all of his 10 books, the other 9 that need to be purchased as well. And suddenly, I mean, I will go off and I'm going to go buy your book. And I need you to sign the book. So when I'm in the United States, I will come and look you up.
My honor.
Which part of the States are you in, by the way?
I'm in Connecticut, which is right outside of New
In
York.
Stanford?
But yes, I'm in Stanford,
Okay, I'm a big
and
fan. Yeah.
I'm also in London often, or other places. So I'm sure
Okay.
we'll meet. By the way, the
Wait.
books are for charity, so
Okay.
you will be
Okay.
not just doing me a favor, but all proceed goes to cancer research.
Excellent. Excellent. I'm really happy to hear that. Do you have a website that we need to share on the channel?
Yeah, it's just my personal site, faisalhaq.com. All my businesses are related to it. I promote, I post something on LinkedIn every day. So, it's all, there's not, nobody needs to buy anything. It's knowledge sharing.
Amazing. Amazing. Terrific. Well, Faisal, what a pleasure to have you on Straight Talk with Af. Be well, keep writing for us. I'm looking forward to your
Thank
next
you.
book too,
Thank
but more importantly, getting this book out to as many people as possible. And I guess anyone and everyone should read this, right? You don't have to be an AI
you. Yes.
expert.
No, you don't, no,
It's
it's
not
meant for anybody and everybody. Yeah.
Yeah. Amazing. Thank you very much, folks. Thanks for jumping on the show. Keep tuning back in. Do follow us and subscribe and notify on the bottom right of this channel. And I look forward to seeing you again on the next show. Be well.
Thank you.